In the hot summer of 1863, the American Civil War was in its third year. The nation was torn apart, brother against brother. General Robert E. Lee and his Confederate Army of Northern Virginia were on a roll. They had won a great victory at Chancellorsville in Virginia just 2 months earlier. Lee decided to take the war to the north. He wanted to invade Pennsylvania. He hoped to relieve the pressure on war-torn Virginia, gather much-needed supplies for his soldiers, and perhaps, just perhaps, force the Union to make peace. A big victory on northern soil could change everything. It might even convince foreign powers like Britain and France to support the Confederacy. The Union's Army of the Potomac, now under the new command of General George G. Meade, had a simple but difficult job: find Lee's army and stop it. Meade had only been in command for 3 days when his army stumbled upon the Confederates. The two great armies did not plan to fight at Gettysburg. It was a small, quiet Pennsylvania town with 10 roads leading into it, like the spokes of a wheel. On the morning of July 1, 1863, Confederate soldiers went into the town looking for shoes. Instead, they found Union cavalry. A small fight started. Soon, more soldiers from both sides rushed to the sound of the guns. The battle had begun, almost by accident. No one could have known that this chance encounter would grow into the largest battle ever fought on the American continent. The first day's fighting was fierce. The Confederates were strong and pushed the Union soldiers back through the streets of Gettysburg. The Union forces retreated to the high ground south of town. They took up strong defensive positions on a series of hills and ridges known as Cemetery Hill, Culp's Hill, and Cemetery Ridge. This high ground would prove to be a crucial advantage. As the sun set on that first day, both armies knew the real fight was yet to come. The fields and hills around this small town were about to become a historic battlefield. The stage was set for a monumental confrontation. Lee was confident. He believed his men were invincible and could defeat the Union Army anywhere. Meade was cautious. He knew he had a strong defensive position, and that his men had to hold it at all costs. The fate of the war, and of the United States itself, hung in the balance. The next 2 days would witness some of the most brutal and heroic fighting the world had ever seen. The citizens of Gettysburg huddled in their cellars, listening to the roar of cannons and the constant crackle of rifle fire, praying for an end to the violence that had suddenly consumed their peaceful home. The second day of the battle, July 2nd, saw the fighting spread across the landscape. General Lee planned to attack both ends of the Union line at the same time. He wanted to break the Union defenses before they could get any stronger. On the Confederate right, General James Longstreet was ordered to attack the Union left flank. His men fought desperately at places that would soon have famous names: the Devil's Den, the Wheat Field, the Peach Orchard. The fighting was a confusing and bloody mess. Men fought hand-to-hand among the giant boulders and tangled woods. Control of these key areas went back and forth all afternoon, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. At the same time, another Confederate force attacked the Union right on Culp's Hill and East Cemetery Hill. The goal was to draw Union soldiers away from the main attack on the left. The fighting on these hills was just as intense. Union soldiers, dug in behind stone walls and earthen breastworks, fought hard to protect their high ground. The battle raged late into the evening, the darkness lit by muzzle flashes. The Union line bent, but it did not break. The soldiers of the Army of the Potomac held their ground, refusing to give up their strong defensive position. Their determination was a testament to their will to preserve the Union. One of the most famous actions of the day happened on a small rocky hill called Little Round Top. It was at the very end of the Union line. If the Confederates could take this hill, they could fire down on the entire Union Army. A Union officer realized the hill was undefended and rushed troops to the top just as the Confederates began their attack. The 20th Maine Regiment, led by Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, held the far left of the Union line. They fought off wave after wave of attacks. When they ran out of ammunition, Chamberlain ordered a desperate bayonet charge down the hill, surprising the Confederates and saving the flank. By the end of the second day, both armies were exhausted. The fields around Gettysburg were littered with the dead and wounded. The sounds of battle were replaced by the cries of injured men. Lee's plan to crush the Union Army had failed. The Union line had held firm, though at a terrible cost. General Meade had managed his forces well, moving reinforcements to critical points just in time. Lee, however, was not ready to admit defeat. He believed his men had come close to victory. He decided to risk everything on one more final attack the next day. This decision would lead to the most famous charge in American history. The third and final day of the battle, July 3rd, would be the decisive one. After the failures of the previous day, General Lee decided on a bold and risky plan. He would launch a massive assault against the center of the Union line on Cemetery Ridge. He believed the Union center had been weakened to support the flanks on the second day. This was a great gamble. The attack would have to cross nearly a mile of open field, under constant fire from Union cannons and rifles. General Longstreet, Lee's most trusted subordinate, advised against the attack. He argued that no 15,000 men ever arrayed for battle could cross that field. Lee, however, was determined. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the Confederate Army began a massive artillery bombardment. Over 150 cannons opened fire on the Union position. The goal was to destroy the Union artillery on Cemetery Ridge and soften up the infantry defenses. The Union cannons answered back, and for nearly 2 hours, the largest artillery duel of the war shook the ground. The air was filled with smoke, fire, and the deafening roar of the guns. The Union artillery chief, however, cleverly ordered his guns to cease firing slowly. This tricked the Confederates into thinking they had succeeded. They had not. The Union cannons were mostly unharmed and waiting. Then came the infantry assault, forever known as Pickett's Charge. Around 3 o'clock, about 12,500 Confederate soldiers stepped out of the woods and began their long, orderly march across the open ground. They were a magnificent and terrifying sight, with their battle flags flying. But as they marched, the waiting Union artillery opened up on them with devastating effect. Canister and shell tore huge gaps in their lines. As they got closer, Union rifle fire added to the slaughter. Still, they came on. A small number of brave Confederates, led by General Lewis Armistead, actually broke through the Union line at a stone wall known as the Angle. This moment was the high water mark of the Confederacy. It was the closest the South ever came to winning the war, but the breakthrough was short-lived. Union reinforcements rushed in, and the Confederates were surrounded and either killed, captured, or forced to retreat. The charge was a disaster. In less than an hour, more than half of the attacking Confederate soldiers were lost. As the shattered survivors streamed back to their lines, General Lee rode out to meet them, telling them, "It is all my fault. The Battle of Gettysburg was over. The Union had won a major victory." The cost of the three-day battle was immense and horrifying. It was the deadliest battle of the Civil War. The total number of casualties, killed, wounded, captured, or missing, was staggering. The Union Army suffered about 23,000 casualties, while the Confederate Army lost around 28,000 men. This was more than a third of Lee's entire army. The fields and farms around Gettysburg became a vast hospital and graveyard. For weeks after the battle, the grim work of caring for the wounded and burying the dead continued. The scale of the loss shocked both the North and the South. For the Confederacy, the defeat at Gettysburg was a crushing blow from which it would never fully recover. Lee's army retreated back to Virginia, its aura of invincibility shattered. Never again would the Confederates be able to launch a major invasion of the North. The loss of so many experienced soldiers and officers was devastating. On the same day that Lee's army began its retreat, July 4th, the city of Vicksburg, Mississippi, surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant. The combination of these two major Union victories, Gettysburg and Vicksburg, is widely considered the turning point of the war. The tide had turned decisively in favor of the Union. The battle had a profound effect on morale. In the North, the victory sparked celebrations and renewed hope that the war could be won. It boosted the confidence of the Army of the Potomac and its commander, General Meade. In the South, the news of the defeat brought despair. The dream of a swift victory and independence faded. The war would drag on for nearly 2 more years, but the Confederacy was now fighting a defensive war with dwindling resources and manpower. The strategic initiative had passed to the Union for good. 4 months later, in November 1863, President Abraham Lincoln traveled to the battlefield to dedicate a national cemetery for the Union soldiers who had died there. In his short but powerful speech, the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln redefined the purpose of the war. He spoke not just of preserving the Union, but of a new birth of freedom and a government of the people, by the people, for the people. The Battle of Gettysburg thus became more than just a military victory. It became a symbol of American sacrifice and the enduring struggle for freedom and democracy, a legacy that continues to shape the nation's identity.